Brianna, I am so excited to chat with you today. Thank you so much for joining for our
Thank you.
conversation.
Thank you so much for having me, Laura. I always love being in your presence. You're such a beautiful person to be around, so thank you.
So, if you don't follow Brianna, she is the founder, CEO, owner of the community at Conscious Mommy, and one of my favorites because I feel like your parenting advice is always just so practical and, most importantly, very grounded in trauma informed practices. So, could you share a little bit, just for people who don't know you, introduce yourself real quickly and tell us about your background?
Sure. So I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I specialize in perinatal, infant, and early childhood mental health. I'm currently in private practice in Redondo Beach, but prior to working in private practice, I worked for maybe 5, 6, 7 years in community mental health settings. So I did a lot of home visits, primarily actually working in the home with foster youth, homeless youth all around Los Angeles, Compton, South Central, Watts, parts of Long Beach. And so much of those experiences that I had being a clinician in those settings, it shaped the way that I work.
You can tell.
Um,
Yeah, you can
yeah,
tell.
yeah, it really working with foster youth specifically taught me the importance of a secure attachment and how so much of the children there are just severely misunderstood. And often our knee-jerk response is to try to fix and try to control their behaviors because let's be honest, they're having a trauma response, so their behaviors can be very intense and very dysregulating and very difficult
And
to
different. They
be
may look and
different.
feel different than
Correct.
what you would typically see in a child who hasn't experienced, neglect or abuse.
Right. And it's challenging. Okay.
Hmm.
So we have to honor that. Like this is challenging. But at the end of the day, what these children were really needing is somebody who could see them and
Hmm.
hear them and understand them and help them feel safe. And once that was able to be established, and that wasn't always the case that it could be, but when it could, we would often see the challenging behaviors reduce significantly. So I love my work. I love what I do. I love working with parents and with children and with new moms and people just getting started in their parenting journey. That's
Yeah.
a real joy of mine. Yeah. And then I
Yeah.
wrote the book. I wrote
I
Parent
know.
Yourself
And I'm
First.
like so excited. Your new book, I did recently finish it. I listened to the audio of it. And I really appreciate everything. And, for those who are listening, she does absolutely incorporate nuance and stories about foster families, former foster youth parenting for the first time. And so I appreciated all of it and I really felt connected. And that's why I wanted to have this conversation today so we could kind of talk through some very common scenarios for foster
Yeah.
families and you could provide a little bit of kind of a preview of your frameworks of what you offer in the book because I will say even someone who has some experience parenting, I'm not brand new anymore. I still took away a ton. And so I really appreciate that and I've already put into practice many of the things that you taught me. So thank you for that.
It's awesome.
So let's dive in. So I think, when we think about brand new parents and brand new foster parents who've never parented before, one of the things I hear from the community a lot, and myself included, is just the intensive sensory overload that
Yeah.
comes with parenting because you had your life before and now you have children and there's screaming, there's clutter everywhere, and, with a lot of youth in our care, maybe a lot of touching and being held and needing to be close. I had a child once who was literally on my arm for most of the day. And that can be a lot as a parent, that, feeling these sensations. So could you walk us through just a little bit of things to the caregiver can think about in
Yeah.
these moments of feeling kind of that overload?
We have to understand two things. Number one, no matter how you get into parenthood, it is probably going to be overwhelming for your nervous system. I just like to call it the system, but for your own personal system, it's going to be overwhelming. There's going to be aspects of your own regulation system that are going to be challenged by just the daily shenanigans of children, but it's especially challenged when we are working with children who are traumatized. And if we're working with foster youth, if we're bringing a foster child into our home, it's not just a kid that's climbing all over you and clawing all over you and screaming. It's actually a child who is in their own state of severe distress and having their own trauma response because, I don't know, maybe something you cooked that it had a smell to it that reminded that child of something, but they're too little to be able to articulate it. And that memory is associated with pain. And now all of a sudden they're screaming, and their nervous system is looking for a nervous system to mirror them and to regulate them and to help them get grounded, calm, and safe again. They're, especially a foster child, right? They're not used to that. They're used to just being in severe chronic stress, traumatic stress, where the system is just, it's stuck in, either it's on go, and so we're hyperactive and we're screaming and we're yelling and we're fighting and we're running away, or it's stuck on the other end of the spectrum where we're frozen and we're disconnected and we're completely withdrawn. And so what I always invite every parent to do, but especially parents of foster youth, is you have to get comfortable and aware of your own system. So you're overwhelmed in your body. Before you can help that little one get nice and grounded in their body, you have to get grounded in yours first. So very practically speaking, if a kid is screaming, it might be some headphones, right, to just block out some of that noise. It might be a change of scenery, a change of environment. Let's go outside. Let's go for a walk. Let's let the wind carry that sound coming out of you and go for a walk. There's something really lovely about being outdoors that can be very grounding, very, very centering. But then the next thing is that we need to do that's less practical, but I would argue is more important, is our own self-reflection work. So we have to get good at understanding why this is so triggering for us. What is it about for us personally? So in the book, I have several different strategies. One that is really useful is the name, frame, claim. So being able to name it, wow, I'm feeling flooded and overwhelmed in my system right now. This kid is touching me and I cannot stand to be touched again. I'm over it.
And this is often a brand new sensation, especially for new parents.
Yes, of course, but we have a word for it. It's called touched out.
Yes.
We have a word for it. There's an actual universal experience that we all have as parents. It's feeling touched out. And it's not, I wouldn't even say it's necessarily unique to the foster care community. It is universal amongst all parents. But regardless, we want to be able to name what we're experiencing. When we can name it and we can frame it and we can claim it, then we can tame it. All right? So then we want to frame it. I'm feeling this way because. Now, a lot of the times, it's our own childhood. It's our own wounds. It's our own life experiences that are causing us to feel this way. What I'm essentially asking us to do is to take the heat off of that child. And rather than I'm feeling touched out because this kid won't stop touching me, I'm feeling touched out and I don't like this sensation in my body, and it's reminding me of growing up. Feeling like my parents were always breathing down my back and they were micromanaging me all the time. I'm feeling reminded of that sensation. So we're actively taking it away from and not making it about this child in front of us. Because if we're really going to make it about the child in front of us, this child needs support. Point blank, period, end of story. That is it.
Feeling comfort by being close or
Correct.
hanging on you or wanting to be held.
They're getting a need met. And they're utilizing you as the available adult to get their need met. The child isn't necessarily doing anything wrong. Is their way of getting the need met productive? Not always, but the underlying issue is that they have needs that need to be met. And I would say that is certainly amplified in foster kids because these children are in the system because they did not have their needs adequately provided for and adequately met. So yes, they are going to be extra in how they seek that from a parent. That's why it's even more crucial that we're doing something like the name, frame, and then we claim it. So the claiming portion here is I am responsible for getting my needs met. Here's what I'm needing right now. I'm needing a little space. I'm needing a break. Maybe this is where you set up a little barrier around yourself because maybe you don't have access to respite in that exact moment, but you do have access to a weighted blanket. And you put that weighted blanket around you and you say, you know what, my love, I'm going to just put this around me and then you can touch my arm. Now we have a little bit of a barrier to protect your system a little bit, and the child can still get their needs met. Or maybe you say, hey kiddo, why don't you lay on the couch? And I see you really want lots of touch. Why don't you lay on the couch? I'm going to pile you up with some pillows, and you tell me if it feels okay. And then I'm going to give you some pillow presses. Now you're in charge of the touching rather than feeling intruded upon. But the point here is that we, as the adults, are in charge of getting our needs met. And we are also in charge of helping our children get their needs met. And it is never the other way around. It is never the child's responsibility to be tuned into what we're needing and adjust themselves to ensure that our needs get met. When we wire children to think that way, we're really wiring them for codependence. And, in foster youth, there is a high likelihood that that they're coming into the situation. They're coming into your home already with an incredible amount of codependence rather than a sense of healthy interdependence and security. So we certainly don't want to be like reactivating those wounds in the little ones. We want to be course correcting as much as we can.
Well, and perhaps they've also had experiences where their parent has reacted differently or responded differently, and this is what they've learned, this is all they know. And so when they may be misinterpreting your response.
Yes.
And so, you have to be very gentle through these interactions. And I really appreciate these frameworks that you offer in those moments. I think another piece that really kind of activates a lot of people in my community is when we're out in public and now suddenly there's other people involved, because it's not just our home, right? We have workers coming in, we have advocates coming into our home, and then we go out into community a lot. Of course, for normalcy purposes and for visits and for appointments. And sometimes as we get to know a child, their behaviors and needs are not as predictable.
Right, especially.
And so we do run into some escalations. And I know from my experience too, being out in public and having an escalation now introduces a whole other set of considerations. You may have a child who's yelling at you, "You're not my mom, don't touch me."
Right.
Or running away. What are some things that as caregivers we can think about in these moments?
Practically speaking, I would expect it. I would expect that there is going to be, that there is a likelihood of some kind of escalation when we are out and about, especially if we think about the child's trauma history. Were they removed while they were at school? Were they detained in a public space? We know that this child has interacted and met with a lot of strangers. So being in a public space and being around a bunch of unfamiliar people may just activate that threat response. And then we see the behavior as a result of the threat response. So very practically speaking, one, we should expect it. And two, prepare our kids ahead of time so that they know what to expect. One of the best ways to support unpredictable behavior is by providing a highly predictable environment. Yeah. So even
I think that would be a fundamental foster parent and probably parenting as well.
Correct.
Skill is providing predictability.
Highly predictable environment. These children really do require it. All children do, but I would say especially children that are dealing with trauma. And so that could look like making a list of what we're going to buy and letting the kid hold it and letting the kid cross that list off and telling the child ahead of time, we're going to go into the store and we're going to go to these aisles, and some aisles are going to feel cold and some aisles will feel fine. And you might see a really great snack that you want. And here's what you can do when you want that. You can say, may I have that, please? And if it's in our budget, honey, I'm going to say yes. And if it's not in our budget, then we'll make a plan for it. So I'm talking that high level of preparing them for whatever kind of pushback you could realistically expect or imagine might happen. So that's I'm using a grocery store as an example, but honestly, it could be anywhere. It could be going to the park. Yes. Kids might bring toys and they may not want to share those toys, right? It could be going to the pool, the public pool. You do need to wear your floaties. Let's try them here at home first and see how you feel about them. Right? Let's see how you feel about that. Let's practice our walking feet around water, and let's talk about why walking feet is important around water. Right? So those are the practical. But then on that less practical but more important is understanding that when a child is screaming at you, you're not my mom, you're not my parent. And then you've got people looking at you and your system is flooded. You're embarrassed, you're overwhelmed.
I feel it. I've been there.
Right? right? You might even be scared. Like, you might be like, oh my God, are people going to think I stole this kid? Like, you might be
Fear.
afraid in that moment. All of that you're experiencing is incredible information for you to use to understand the child in front of you. So children are brilliant at making you, the parent, feel what they're feeling inside, but don't know how to articulate it. So they're screaming, "You're not my parent. Get away from me. I don't even want to be here." That child might be feeling scared. They might be feeling embarrassed. They might be feeling out of control, feeling like a loss of control and needing some power. So rather than you, don't talk like that, and going into correction and just layering on the shame
And the punishment.
and the punishment, don't talk like that, I'm taking away your popcorn, no, none of that. What you're going to do instead is you're going to say, "You're right. I'm not your parent, and I am taking care of you. And it's my job to take care of you, and I want to know what's happening inside for you right now. Are you feeling scared about something? Are you feeling frustrated? I'm listening." And I think that if you follow up connection with "I'm listening," those might be the two most powerful words that you can tell any child, but especially a child that's been in a system, especially a child that's been passed around the system, who does not usually have a felt sense, a felt belief, and a felt understanding that people listen to them.
Yeah. And I think it's important to make time for listening too. That's something, as you talk about like getting prepared, is you as a caregiver preparing for the time.
Right.
This is a brand new experience and it's a new child and you're still learning to tune in with their needs.
Right.
You need time to like really draw out those transitions, really have plenty of time to work through a moment of friction.
Right. Exactly. And that's a really good point. Yeah, you should probably add in time for that. Don't be like, we have an hour to get to the grocery store, then we got to go to this, and don't do that in a new or potentially triggering experience for your children. That time to transition, that time to be slow and move in and out of these different sensory experiences and these different social experiences is so crucial for their systems learning how to stay regulated and grounded during those different changes.
One part of the book that really kind of like resonated as well is that, and excuse me, I don't remember the exact term, but the pyramid of like needs.
Yeah, the ladder of needs.
Thank you. I think that that's another consideration for brand new parents, especially of kids who, are still learning about how in these moments at the grocery store, at the park, in your home, how that ladder of needs like plays into every single scenario.
Mm-hmm. Yep. The ladder of needs really helps us decode what is potentially beneath the child's behavior. Sometimes it's safety. Sometimes they're just physically hurt and they need us to respond to it. Sometimes it's they're tired, they're hungry, or they need connection. They need your physical time. They need your physical presence, right? In a world where parents are overworked, burned out, and chronically distracted, we are seeing much more attention-seeking behavior. And if you're listening to this, I'm putting air quotes over it.
Yes.
We're seeing much more attention-seeking behavior, but it's only because we are distracted. So we can look at it as distracted breaking behavior because they are trying to get us to be fully present and engaged with them. And I'm sure that you've noticed this with your own children, that when you put your distractions away, don't the behaviors go down?
Well, it becomes a totally different situation.
Completely different situation, completely different environment. Your child, the resonance is there. Your nervous system and their nervous system don't have anything in between them. But this is the first generation of children that are fighting for the attention of adults with an inanimate object that is chronically attached to us. The very first generation of children, and we do not know the full long-term ramifications of that. We will know in about 20 or 25 years. So I hope parents heed that and understand how crucial.
I would argue, I found myself becoming even more connected to my phone because I've learned this in reading your book.
Mm-hmm.
I was so fearful of workers calling or the advocate calling with news. A lot of times we spend our days on the edge of our seat as foster parents. And I found myself so worried about my phone because I was worried about possible news. And that's on me, that's something that I'm still noticing. A certain feeling that can come.
Yeah. Is it like a hypervigilance, like a little bit of an anxiety?
I think that's like a pretty common thing for families providing foster care is that feeling.
All the more reason, yes, but all the more reason why foster parents must be diligent about caring for their own system. So in the first part of the book, I talk about learning how to sit with it. So when that hypervigilance and that anxiety comes in, slowing ourselves down, internally sensing and noticing where in my body do I feel that anxiety and that hypervigilance. Like for you, what does it feel like, Laura, when it's present?
It's like a chest feeling. It's like
chest.
It's kind of like tight.
A tightness in the chest. So just taking the time to be slow and really feel that tightness in the chest. And then in the book, I invite you to talk to it. But for foster parents, what I'm going to invite you to do is talk to what feels pleasant in the body. So we have the tightness in the chest and we're noticing it and we're aware of it. And then maybe I do a little body scan. This is happening in the moment, Laura. Maybe I do a little body scan and I just notice that like my hands are in my lap and they feel really heavy. And maybe I'm like moving my fingers on my thumbs and it feels pleasant. And I'm going to focus my attention, my energy on what feels good in the body. And this practice of being able to like pendulate between what feels distressing and overwhelming and looming into what in the physical experience feels good. Is how we actually support our nervous systems so that we're not living in that chronic state of distress. It might still be there. The hypervigilance, the fear, the anxiety, like it's not going away because there is a real possibility that you're going to get some scary news. But I don't have that scary news right now. What I have right now is the weight of my hand in my lap, and it feels good. I have the feeling of grass between my toes, and that feels comforting and soothing, and I enjoy that.
One thing I do is I usually put music on, or I have like a little space heater, and I like how that makes me feel.
Looking outward, so if connecting into your own internal experience does not feel good, which if you have a history of trauma, that might be hard. That might feel scary and that might feel intimidating. Do what Laura is talking about, because that's a great advice.
I didn't even realize it was an outward thing I was doing.
It is outward, right? I'm listening to music. Maybe you hear some birds, or maybe you do put on a song. Right now, you're really noticing it and you're really taking it in. All of these are great tools for taking care of your own system.
And they feel so like small and simple, but they are not, because
they're powerful.
If that can get me to chill for a second, I can now engage the child because we were going to go make dinner and we're going to, I can connect to them. I can spend my time looking in their eyes and hearing them and listening to their stories of the day. And that changes the day. That just completely changes the day. And this is obviously all your book is walking through a ton of these scenarios. If we have time for like one more quick.
Let's do it.
Okay, so a final thing that I know I hear a lot from my families are within the sibling dynamics, and that is parentification. This is something that I don't hear any other creator talking about, or therapist. When you go into therapy sessions, there's not a lot of sibling dynamic support. Could you give us a quick kind of overview of how we could think about that situation and how a foster parent may step in when that is occurring in their home?
So I think what's really important to remember is if you're taking care of a sibling group, first of all, what is their history? Have they always been together? Do they have a history of being split up? That's really important if we're also seeing parentification. Because I want foster parents to understand that it's not necessarily your job to stop this pattern of parentification. It's more your job to first understand its function. The child, it's usually the older child, is parentified because they learned to survive that way. They learned that in order for them and their siblings to all continue to live, literally life or death, that it was up to that sibling to do that work. So when we rush in,
it's just a sad.
It is sad. It is sad, and it's also. It's also their survival mechanism. So what we don't want to do, correct, we have to honor it. We don't want to go in and try to like remove it. Well, I'm taking care of you now. You don't have to look after your sisters because you have me and I will do it for you. What I encourage you to do is to invite, can I be a part of that process with you? Show me what have you learned to take good care of your sister? Wow, I see. You are such an incredible caretaker. And I know that you learned that because you didn't have anybody taking care of you and the kids. And now here you are. Even though I'm here to take care of you, you still feel like it's your job. And I'm here to be on that with you, honey. So it's not that we just say, fine, yeah, here you go. Take care of your siblings here. It's that we join her or him on the process, and we eventually gain their trust that we are capable
and that can
to
take
provide.
time.
That takes
And
quite a bit of
they're
time.
watching us closely to see
Correct.
if we slip up or we don't hold a promise.
Right.
And that's a lot. So it does take time because we always make mistakes, right? We're going to work through it, but it can take time. I want to tell that so people know that this isn't something that with this beautiful conversation you've just modeled, it doesn't suddenly
change everything.
Change everything, yeah.
No, it takes quite a bit of time. You're probably going to be having that conversation multiple times. And if it's not a permanent placement, that may just be where the conversation stays. If there is reunification on the table, this child is probably going to stay in survival mode because they're not fully settled. They don't have a full sense of security yet.
Yeah.
And that's not your fault. You want to almost see yourself as like a container. I'm providing the holding space for you, and I'm here to support you and be present to you. I know, and maybe we can do it together. You want to change her diaper? Okay, maybe we can do it together. Maybe I can help you here. Would you like the wipes? Or would you like me to do the wiping? And then you can watch how I do it, right? And very gently offer a switch in roles.
Yeah, over time.
Yeah. Over time.
I mean, there's so much to consider. I really appreciate you walking through these different scenarios. I think there's so much that can come up in a foster home, and that is why I would, absolutely encourage people to check out your book. I will say it was so helpful because you literally walk through scenarios like this. This is what you do. You set it up, and then you provide your frameworks and some options to consider.
Yeah.
And to take that knowledge and then, obviously put it into the context of your home. And so Thank you so much for sharing your time today and obviously all your expertise in your book. And I always learn from you. So thank you.
Thank you, Laura. And thank you for your incredible platform. It is such an important platform. I believe so much in what you do. Yeah, I have so much love and an honor for all the families that are in your community. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.